Rolling audio.
Hello and welcome to episode 199 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, are normal household outlets for EV charging the key to mass adoption? We'll stick a fork in it and find out.
Yikes. A majority of U.S. coastal residents support offshore wind power. And no, it's not because they hate whales and birds and want them all to die. Well, except for Captain Ahab. He notoriously hates whales.
Are vertical east-west solar panels the best way to generate electricity from the sun? Maybe. At the very least, the panels won't see their shadow, so spring might come early.
Coal and natural gas are starting to collapse in the EU. Also collapsing, all of those coal and gas podcasts. They're on the way out, and the Clean Energy Show is on the rise. It's always been my goal to be more popular in Europe.
All that and a lot more in this edition of the Clean Energy Show. And also this week's show, coal and natural gas is dropping in the EU. I break out the Clean Energy Show defibrillator for a commentary on my local center-left political party supporting fossil fuel greenwashing. And conservative writers lie about a climate scientist's work, and now that climate scientist, well, he has $1 million, Brian.
Sweet.
It's a good news story.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully some conservative writers will lie about us. Okay, so we went ahead and bought a Tesla Model Y, an inventory model that was off the website and in stock in Saskatoon. So we're going to drive up Friday to pick that up.
That's different for you. I mean, last time it was like hailed to death and you had to get a different one. And the first time was during the pandemic where a truck came from Calgary, day's drive away, and dropped it at your door.
Yeah.
And now it's just got to be there, sitting there like a loaf of bread at the grocery store.
Yeah, they had only like 5 or 6 Model Ys in stock, but they had one that was kind of the spec that we want. It's the long-range version in the blue color, and it was there in stock. So we thought, why not do it? Go ahead, no waiting.
So what is the difference in range between the regular Model Y and the long range that you bought?
It's about 100 kilometers, I think. And the performance also has lower range, like maybe 50 kilometers less. So the long-range all-wheel drive seemed like the way to go. It's around 500 kilometers range.
So that'll do you. I was wondering if you might just leave it to the Model S for long range, but you went with the long-range Y. Is it because you figure you need it, or you might use it for longer trips after all?
Well, it's mostly because people in my household have bad knees, and we also have to drive around a lot of senior citizens that are a part of our extended family. And senior citizens do not like getting into lower cars.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah. SUVs are so popular. They're a lot easier to get into. And when you're picking up a senior citizen and giving them a ride, this makes a lot more sense.
And you'll be a senior one day soon, so
someday.
You never know.
My knees are okay, but, I can understand it.
I don't like getting into the lower cars. It is, I'm not an Olympic athlete or anything. It would be easier for them, but I'm, 6 feet and I always have to crunch my head down, and my neck doesn't always want to bend in the right way. And I have to stick a leg out the car. So it is very nice to have taller cars. And even my Bolt is, it's small, but it's tall.
Yeah.
And the Leaf is tall too.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice. I know the new Prius that we would have gotten if we couldn't get an electric car probably is lower than ever, and it's the roof line is lower too. So when do you get it again?
Friday. We're going to pick it up Friday in Saskatoon.
Oh, so a 2-person trip up?
Yeah.
Yeah, my son's coming down, so be careful how you drive.
Okay.
He's coming down on Friday from the same city. and if he blows a tire, your phone will be ringing. So
yeah. No problem. So just wanted to mention quickly, Stellantis is now the last major car maker to get on board with the NACS charging adapter for North America. So that's basically it now. It's a done deal. The Tesla connector is the standard in North America. So they've announced that, and they're going to start offering it next year. 53 electric buses have been purchased for our city where we live, Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. Frigid, cold place. But they have figured out that electric buses are going to work here. And
how did they figure it out? Because they don't have any.
Yeah.
They should have done what other places have done, like Edmonton.
Yeah.
and Saskatoon and buy one and run it for a while to see what range they want at least. So, but they're buying all long range ones, I noticed. I don't know, like I said, the length across the city is about 17 kilometers, but I don't know what the bus routes, how they configure the routes here, how long they are. Some routes in the world are actually fairly short.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that works, but it's very expensive to buy long range buses too.
Yeah.
And they're hard to heat, Brian. They're very hard to heat that cabin.
Yeah.
Because they're so big. So some of them, have taken the route of radiating heat from the floor. I don't know what these ones are. I think they're Canadian made, aren't they?
Yeah. And Novus, I think maybe was the company. But it's a hub type system. So the buses are often sitting at their hubs. So I think that they might go with the sort of overhead charging thing or something. But I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, there's a hub downtown, and they could easily, I guess you could put them anywhere on the route as long as it's a commercial area, not in front of somebody's house. You don't want to put an overhead charger there, but and then you do want to serve as many buses as you can. And I do think that they do have overhead chargers, come to think of it. But I haven't been paying too close attention. It's too little too late for me.
Yeah.
I have been wanting this for a long time. However, I will ride one and record something for the show for you when they do arrive to my neighborhood.
And it'll take a few years for this whole plan to kind of take effect. They're going to buy them over the next few years. And then just wanted to mention a quick story about an electric snowplow in Norway. I think the story was on Electrek, but it's a snowplow. Of course, we know Norway is really big on electric vehicles. This is a test project. It has a 1,000 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is huge. Like that's as much as more than 10 cars worth of battery power. But for something like that, plowing snow on highways in frigid, cold conditions, maybe that's something you need is a gigantic battery pack for that. So they've got one as a sort of a test project, and it sounds like it's going well.
Well, that is. I mean, my car is 65 kilowatt hours, and I noticed there's some trucks out there with, pushing 200, some pickup trucks, but that's getting to be an awfully big battery to carry around. So you didn't watch the Super Bowl again? You're not a Super Bowl guy, right?
No, not at all.
Not even for the halftime show?
Well, and I usually look up the commercials, but I didn't do that because I don't know. It sounds maybe there wasn't a lot of EV commercials.
There was a few. There was one good one. One of the best commercials that people liked the most was from Mercedes or BMW. Sorry, it was Christopher Walken. People impersonating. Have you seen that one?
No.
He's going through his daily life and everyone's impersonating him.
Nice ride.
It's the real deal. 100% electric.
It's the real deal.
Yeah.
And he's getting really annoyed by it, and then he gets into his quiet car, and it's nice. But that's I don't know. I don't know how much they move the needle. They don't ever seem to. It just kind of makes it look like your brand is advanced. Mm-hmm. We didn't get hardly any commercials here in Canada. It's a tragic thing that, we are simulcasting and we get stupid Canadian commercials for our crappy Bell TV Crave platform.
Yeah.
And even got a local commercial that is so bad that I will never use that furnace company. The furnace company local commercials here are hideous, absolutely hideous. And they direct on themselves and they think they're good. And it's just the worst of the city we live in is portrayed in those commercials, the mentality of what goes on there. But anyway, the stadium in Las Vegas is 100% powered by renewables. I saw a feature that NBC did that they have a solar farm outside the city that they have a power purchase agreement from.
Yeah.
The roof lets in 10% of the sunlight, but keeps it cool. Obviously, it's a desert location, and you want to keep the heat out as much as possible.
Yeah, I know we talked about in the early days of the podcast, I think, probably the first year, there was a story about Las Vegas as a city trying to get all of their city operations to 100% renewable. And maybe they've made it by now.
Yeah, but making I don't know what, it was at least $2 billion stadium's not very environmental, but I don't imagine it is. Brian, it's time for me to do a James commentary and get out the Clean Energy Show defibrillator. Because I'm mad as hell. I had trouble sleeping last night. Yeah. I had to have 2 cups of coffee. I never have 2 cups of coffee.
Well, that's your first mistake right there.
Well, I don't like the way it feels. It's a little much for me. The Federal New Democratic Party in Canada, that's the country where Brian and I live, if you're new to the show, they are a center-left party. They say, this is one of their their energy critic has said, they're not in power, but their energy critic has said that it may be time to apply the same advertising restrictions to the oil industry as it did to tobacco. You can't advertise tobacco since the 1990s, and you certainly can't make it seem like it's healthy. The NDP's federal natural resources critic Charlie Angus tabled a private member's bill that would ban misleading fossil fuel advertising. And this is from CBC. Angus said Canada's oil industry is shifting its propaganda strategy by promoting its products as clean and claiming they can be part of the climate solution. Are you sick of greenwashing ads from the oil industry? I mean, I come across them all the time.
Yeah, sometimes they pop up in social media too, and sometimes I report them because they just seem that's often a lie.
Way to go, Brian.
Yeah.
The activist, the quiet activist here. Yeah, so they said, Charlie Angus, the guy who proposed this bill, said that's like Benson and Hedges telling you that they can help end lung cancer, which is true. It's a good analogy. This is because, he says, big oil has always relied on big tobacco playbook of delay and disinformation, which is so true. And I throw things at my TV, and I can't afford a new TV, and I get so angry when I see that crap on TV. The new bill would outlaw marketing that downplays the climate-altering emissions and health hazards associated with the industry, or promotes fossil fuels in ways that are false, misleading, or deceptive, which is basically what they're doing. Naturally, oil-rich Alberta took offense to this, and you can't say anything negative about the oil industry whatsoever, or they'll jump on you like a attack dog. Health Canada, Brian, estimates that air pollution caused primarily by burning fossil fuels in North America contributes to, get this, 15,300 premature deaths per year. That's just in Canada. Well, guess what? Our air goes around the world. It's not just Canada. But 15,300 people every goddamn year in Canada is a result of this. The Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment cites research that states fossil fuel air pollution in Canada leads to 34,000 premature deaths annually. They claim the Pathways Alliance, that's basically the people who are doing the most. It's the fossil fuel lobbying industry group that puts out most of these ads. They claim that those net zero ads in Canada were misleading because the consortium has not fully accounted for how it would achieve net zero emissions. Quote, oil can never be net zero because 80% of the life cycle emissions are released when oil is burned. They're always saying, well, we're going to have cleaner oil. It's not going to be cleaner when it's burned. 80% of that oil, even if you get it to zero, is when it's burned.
Yeah, well, they're often talking about cleaning up their operations and, our operations are getting cleaner, like we can extract the oil more cleanly. And that is technically possible. Like if you have all electric equipment to extract the oil and that's all powered by clean energy, then your extraction can be net zero. But if it's pumping oil out of the ground, which is going to be burned, then it's ridiculous.
The UN says burning coal, oil, and gas accounts for 75% of global climate-altering emissions and 90% of all carbon dioxide emissions. The Canadian Physicians Group said in a 2023 report, by normalizing fossil fuels, greenwashing delays the much-needed shift to more sustainable energy options. Now, here's where I take umbrage. Our own center-left party in Saskatchewan, where we live, our province here, next to Alberta, they're not taking the federal approach. They are against this legislation. They've co-signed a letter with the Alberta NDP, which are not true NDP people, and they've said that this is not good. They said... It was me who couldn't sleep last night, ironically. I bet they had a good sleep, but they shouldn't have. This is what the physicians group said this. Instead of focusing on real emissions reductions like the science tells us we need to, fossil fuel companies have been crafting misleading tactics to continue exploiting fossil fuels, harming people and the planet with impunity and amassing enormous profits in the process. 8 million people die from smoking worldwide each year. Brian, the WHO says nearly 7 million die prematurely from pollution each year. So it's basically smoking. That doesn't take into account how many people die currently from climate change, or in the future, certainly it's going to be even worse.
Yeah, and extreme weather events. Yep.
What we put into the air today isn't going anywhere. So it's not just what happens this year from your pollution, it's what happens 30 years from now, 50 years from now. Between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year in the world. Climate change alone. That's just what they can predict right now. And this is what our local NDP in Saskatchewan are supporting. Now think of it as genocide against people who breathe. These people are all among us. Every one of them who are elected officials for that party follow me on Twitter. The leader of that party is a Facebook friend. I'm not sure why. There's a connection to us. They're not going to be Facebook friends anymore after this gets out, but I'm pissed off as hell. So this is what they said in the joint statement with the Alberta NDP. This is the Saskatchewan and Alberta NDP. Energy companies are important job creators in Alberta and Saskatchewan and shouldn't be singled out. That is not the criteria. Being in a job creator, I mean, the tobacco industry gives good paying jobs. Should we support them? Do you want your children to watch ads about the benefits of cigarettes? What about asbestos mining? I'm sure those jobs are great too. Where do you draw the line? I can only assume they place a cigarette, these people, in their children's lunch boxes each day because they don't give a damn about what their children breathe. I just assume that. It's almost as if the news of the climate emergency hasn't reached our shores yet, Brian. It's almost like they haven't heard of it before. It's as if they can't see the brown summer skies that we saw last year, the choking air that I had to close my fucking windows for. I don't want to have to close my windows so I can breathe. It's like they don't give a shit. Fossil fuels are responsible for this. The science tells us that. Pretending burning them will ever be clean is delaying life-saving planet action. This is what they're doing. For me, you've crossed a line. You've crossed the line, and I will not be voting for you because until you can break your allegiance to the fossil fuel industry, you won't have my vote. It's going to happen eventually. You will break ties with the oil industry. The sooner it happens, the better chance you can look your children in the eye when they're adults and who are living in a post-climate world. The sooner you let go of the heavy clasp of the oil industry and let them sink away into the abyss, the sooner we can get on with saving millions of lives. But you are delaying this. You personally are delaying this by approving greenwashing. Every day you get up, you set out to normalize and delay the fossil fuel transition to clean. The lives of many people are in their hands. What would Tommy Douglas say, Brian? Well, I asked him. And this is what he said.
The obtuse fellow from the Clean Energy Show is right. Allowing greenwashing delays action that will save countless lives. I do not recognize the mud and prairie NDP.
Tommy Douglas wouldn't roll over at his grave. He'd leap out of it. He'd jump right out.
Tommy Douglas, the father of Medicare here in Canada and one of Saskatchewan's political heroes.
If you can't take a stand against the fossil fuel industry lying in ads, what can you take a stand on? Prolonging the killing of millions of people is what greenwashing does. Have the courage to stand up to fossil fuels because it's going to happen. Fossil fuels will decline and you'll eventually let go of their grasp. So do it sooner than later. And educate your electorate. If they don't understand, educate them.
Well, presumably they've made a calculation that they're going to get more votes by supporting fossil fuels than they will get by telling the truth. But as we've just discussed, they're losing your vote, they're losing my vote, and they're definitely losing the vote of a lot of people around here.
My son begged me not to do this. He said, Dad, the NDP is the lesser of two evils. I mean, imagine if this right-wing party gets in again, who will they come out against? They came out against trans kids. What else will they do? Who else will they oppress? And, the NDP are up in the polls finally. I take full credit for that, for mocking the Saskatchewan party for their stand on clean energy. I do what I can.
Yeah.
But that's I can't not speak truth. That's how I feel. And you can't screw around with people's lives. This is serious stuff. This delays action, and you can't be a part of that.
Okay, before we move on, how's your heart doing?
It's managing. I don't know. It's a little bit erratic, but I have 80% confidence I'll make it through the show. So carry on without me. It's all there in front of you.
All right. Okay. So 68% of U.S. coastal residents support offshore wind farms. This story from Electrek. And this is a thing I've often wondered about. Of course, I traveled to Wales last year, and You could see, the offshore wind farms from the beach. And I kind of wondered, well, there's probably a lot of people that are upset about that. But fully, 2/3 of the people that were surveyed, and this is a poll from Climate Nexus, they support offshore wind, even if it means seeing the turbines spinning out on the horizon from their backyard.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a high number when it comes to these things. That's actually really impressive.
No, and the reason is that people believe that offshore wind is good for U.S. energy independence, reliability, the job market, and the overall economy. So we live in a place where there is lots of energy jobs. They're unfortunately mostly in oil. But you can imagine, too, that there's maybe a lot of places that are going to be getting energy jobs for the first time because of things like offshore wind. Maybe you're a coastal state. You don't have oil and gas. You don't currently have energy jobs. Well, guess what? If you put up a lot of wind and solar, then you're going to have a bunch of energy jobs. And people seem to, generally speaking, understand that. And given the choice between drilling for oil and gas or setting up wind turbines offshore, coastal residents lean heavily toward wind. Over twice as many, 53%, versus only 22% supporting oil and gas offshore. So that's pretty good. The U.S., of course, is ramping up wind. There's lots of U.S. offshore wind projects that have been hitting some big milestones. The first 2 large-scale projects are well underway, with the South Fork Wind project lighting up New York and Vineyard Wind doing the same in Massachusetts. So a great news story. People are ready for offshore wind.
I thought that even in, left-leaning, environmentally conscious Northeast U.S., that you would maybe get 50%.
Yeah.
So that's actually really encouraging.
Yeah, 2/3 is great.
That people are educated enough to know, and they're not falling for disinformation. By the way, who's behind disinformation? The same people who are greenwashing with ads on commercial enterprises. Let's get to vertical bifacial solar panel test. This is done by a YouTuber called Projects with Everyday Dave. I am fascinated by this stuff, Brian. This is right up my alley. This is, if I had the resources, I'd be out there doing this. He looks like he lives on a farm or an acreage, and he's got a fairly substantial rack of solar panels facing south that you see on farms around here a lot, about the same size. I don't know how many panels there are, maybe 30, I don't know, something like that. But behind those, and it's just beyond the shadow of those, is 2 vertical, is it 2 vertical or 4 vertical? He's got a small rack that he had to custom make to make vertical east-west facing panels. Now they're bifacial, which means on the back side they can get up to 50% of the power. The front side is facing west, and the front side is facing east, just to balance it out. Now, he's got lots of data on his farm there from his panels. He lives in Ohio. Some of those panels that you see in that rack there are bifacial, and some of them aren't. So he has comparison between non-bifacial and. Yep. But if you see in that shadow there, Brian, behind them, that's actually where you want to get the sunlight reflected back, because there's a skiff of snow on the ground there. It's winter when that picture was taken. You can see it on our YouTube channel. So he has, it's at 30 degrees because he's south of us. We would probably be, I forget what we are here. I think it's 40 some degrees, with the right angle where you angle them at such a way that you get the most production per year. And for them, it's 30 degrees. For us, it's angled higher. Yeah, okay. So some of them are normal and some of them are bifacial. And he did a test on his data from summer, winter, cloudy, sunny, and snow cover on the main 30-degree panel rack and these panels. For the most part, and he judges them panel by panel, or, couple panels by panel, based against each other, not the whole thing, because it's different output. So for the most part, he found that the vertical bifacial panels, which face west and east, didn't have much of a benefit and produced less electricity overall compared to the normal mounted panels. And one of the reasons he does stuff like this is for farmers, because farmers might want to do this and then have a combine or some sort of equipment for harvesting that goes in between rows of these things. So wide rows, and these would be like a shelter fence between different rows.
Big potential for vertical solar panels.
So the back of the bifacial panels at peak produce half of what the front panels do, even though they're facing the sun in the same way the AM is in the front of the PM. The shadow from the 30-degree rack was right where it'd be beneficial to pick up that reflected sunlight, but it does pick up quite a bit from the snow. The vertical panels facing east and west had no shadow Okay, they had a shadow in the early morning and in the evening, but for the most part in the day, even at noon, there's no shadow because they're hitting right at the sides of them.
Yeah, so the collectors on the back of the panel should theoretically pick up more reflected light because there's no direct shadow right underneath them.
And that is what was happening. They were picking up a lot of reflective light, especially on cloudy and snow-covered days. So the same was true for the vertical panels facing east-west had no shadow. So, the middle of the day is usually a dip on these. It's kind of like a big M. It's big on the morning and evenings and a dip in the day. But for some circumstances, that was a little different. When the panels were covered with snow, so when it snowed, those 30-degree panels were covered in snow.
Yeah.
So a little bit of light gets through, but not much.
Yeah, but the vertical ones never get covered in snow.
That's one of the advantages, and that's why I'm kind of fascinated by this, because we live obviously in a place that gets snow. So when the panels were covered with snow, the vertical did way better, obviously, because there was no snow cover and lots of ground reflection. So it got me to thinking about, the situation of the future where we're overbuilding solar. And I've always said on the show, wouldn't it be cool, and this is just me spitballing here, to have different orientations, like to have an orientation of solar farms that are just for December when it's almost directly upright where we are facing the sun. It's pretty close. Just to get the maximum potential. But then you're wasting it for the summer. You could be getting a lot more in the summer, but you don't need it because you got other panels that are picking it up.
Well, we're hoping to build a new cottage out at our lake, and that's definitely one thing I'm thinking about. You tend to not get much solar in the winter, so I was thinking that same thing. Well, maybe we have a few vertical panels so that our winter production stays decent.
That's an interesting idea, like especially if it was on the side of a building, because he had to rig his own rack. He said he's going to post things when people come out with racks on his website. But yeah, I just got to thinking, when everything's cheaper and we already have a lot of solar around, wouldn't it be interesting to do this? So why not mix the orientation? And right now, solar facing south is like a bell curve. It goes up and then down from the middle of the day. And yeah, but vertical is a little more in the AM and PM with a dip in the middle of the day. But he came up with a mixture of orientations and showed them on a curve here. And it's like an M, but the middle of the M doesn't sink very far. It's just a little bit down. So it's almost flatline throughout much of the day, which is ideal. And the blue line there is mixed orientation. And the green line is just east-west. But if you mix them up, you've had a little bit of them. Anyway, I'm going to let him explain it here in this clip.
If you installed 10 vertical panels facing east, 10 vertical panels facing west, and 10 panels at 30 degrees facing south, you could pull the dip up out of the middle and get almost an ideal result that would likely eliminate any clipping from the inverter. So even though the output on the bar graph shows this scenario only achieving 75% of the max, if I was using a typical undersized inverter, the top of the south-facing curve would be clipped off, and the result would be actually a lot closer.
Very interesting video. I'll put a link in the description, or not the description, the show notes. So it's closer to flat throughout the day, proving my long-held theory that mixing up panels might be a good idea. Now, this is something that hasn't been studied a lot.
Yeah, and he's talking about clipping. So sometimes you might have an inverter that has a sort of a maximum output. So you get all this energy, and then the inverter has to convert that energy from DC to AC. But sometimes at the peak of the day, depending on what your system is like, it'll actually, the curve will actually flatten off at the top because your inverter has a maximum of, say, 7,000 watts or 8,000 watts or something. So, this kind of system would get more production because you're never clipping that top of the curve off.
I remember when I had my solar panels installed, I kept saying to them, I wouldn't mind putting some more on, but I have nowhere to put them. And I was thinking about the side of the house, and I thought, well, that's kind of dumb because you're only getting, energy in the winter. But they modeled it and were actually quite surprised.
Oh, yeah.
They said they were very surprised at how good it is because it's not snow covered ever. And you still get some, it still works in the summer. It's just not ideal.
Yeah.
And in the winter, it brings in maximum.
Yeah, and you've got a big, tall, 2-story house facing south. So, yeah, you could get probably very decent production from, panels just on the side of your house.
So I want to do, I want to cover this more and learn more as we get stuff coming into the show. And if you have any thoughts on this, or if you've experimented with this, or maybe even Brian will do it, maybe you'll do it, put some vertical panels up at the cottage, and that would be very interesting.
Yeah, so that was Projects with Everyday Dave on YouTube. Okay, so coal and gas in the EU. We've talked about this a lot ever since the invasion of Ukraine. And there's some really good numbers here that I just wanted to talk about that are in for 2023. So Europe's coal electricity generation dropped by 26% in 2023 alone, in just that 1 year. This story is from Electrek, and gas dropped by 15% in 2023. So, when people think that the transition to clean energy is not possible, well, that's what's possible in just 1 year. Coal down 26%, gas down 15%. This is from the energy think tank Ember. So this was a 19% total reduction in the EU's power sector emissions. 19% drop in emissions for 1 year. And what's more, for the first time, wind power, which grew by 18%, surpassed gas for the first time, which only accounted for 17% of Europe's electricity. So wind and solar taking center stage in the EU. Together, they've hit a new high. 27% of the EU's electricity in 2023 is now wind and solar. Solar covering about 9% of that. They've got some hydroelectric power, and so renewables, a total 44% share of the EU power mix in 2023, which is amazing. People and businesses also used less electricity overall. So this may have been, again, a result of the invasion of Ukraine. People were more conscious about energy use, and everyone knew that there was a bit of an energy crunch because of that. So demand dropped 3.4% overall, and industries were dialing back their energy use as well. So this is very interesting. Of course, we're going to need more electricity in the future as we switch to electric cars, we switch to heat pumps and so on. So, the new installation of wind and solar is going to have to keep going up, just to basically keep pace with the extra demand that we're all going to need.
Now, I'm surprised by the 15% of natural gas. People will tell you all the time, especially the fossil fuel industry, that natural gas is the transition fuel. Well, it's transitioning down. It's transitioning away. All these things that aren't renewables cost more.
Yeah.
The more renewables get into the mix. Because you're not using them as much.
To call it a transition fuel was appropriate 10, 15, 20 years ago, but it's no longer appropriate.
It certainly kicked the life out of coal before renewables did, but now it's natural gas that's going down. And that's a terrific positive news story, and as you say, it illustrates what is possible. Got a little bit of mail here from the mailbag. Gonna dip in. This is from Lisa, who I believe is in Alberta. She says, "Hi, Brian and James. I love your show. I've been listening to it for a few months. I really love the lightning round because it's always full of positive news about the energy transition, which is often hard to find some days, especially here in Alberta, where I am currently nearing the end of the UPC party's 7-month pause on renewables, which is heinous. Recently on your show, you mentioned Jan Rosenau and then referred to him as a woman, Jan. My partner's nickname is Jan, so yeah. I got confused, and I realized that. I'm sorry about that. This is a totally understandable mistake, since Jan is a commonly woman's name in Canada, and like I say, my partner's name. I follow Jan on LinkedIn, and he is a great resource for energy transition news and education. You should check out his profile. I have. He is the director of the RAP program in the UK nonprofit organization, helping to accelerate the green energy transition. Cheers, Lisa. Lisa, thank you so much for the letter. It's always great to hear what parts of the show, too, that people like, because we always love feedback and we know how to go about the show the best that you'll like it.
Yeah, and I'm working on using more gender-neutral terms, because it's not always necessary to really identify someone's gender, but it is one of those things that's hard to do as my brain reaches 60 years old.
My daughter, who's 16, is like, Dad, you can't call them he or she until you know that they are a he or she. And it's, and I try. I try. Yeah. I swear I try.
It's hard. As well. And I pride myself on my communication skills, but that is a tricky one for an old brain like mine. Okay, so from Canary Media, we have a new category known as micro heat pumps, which I don't think we've talked about before, but this story is sort of focused on people who rent. So there are a lot of people who rent. 44 million households in the U.S. are renters. Well, what do you do if you want to switch to clean heat pump if you're a renter. Well, often you don't have...
God, I can't believe this. I didn't know anything about this. This is like one of those portable air conditioners that you stick a hose out the window.
That is exactly it.
That's amazing.
And there are also the kind that sit in a window, like the older style of air conditioners did as well. And they're just often referred to as an air conditioner with heat. Now, if you're looking for one of these, you have to be careful because sometimes the heat part of these is just a resistive heater, which works and provides heat. But of course, it's not as efficient as a heat pump. So you want to do your research and look for one that actually heats with a heat pump. But yeah, they come in the exact same configurations as air conditioning units do. The ones that sit in the window, the ones that sit on the floor and have a hose that goes to the window. You need some kind of exhaust to the outside. But, these can start at as little as $500 to $700. Of course, they don't necessarily... you're not going to heat an entire house this way. Like a 550 square feet is often the kind of maximum. But if you live in an apartment and you're looking to clean up your power usage, this is a way to do it. And we talked recently, a few weeks ago, about balconies in Europe. People are putting solar panels and collecting their own energy on balconies. This seems like a perfect use case. You're trying to produce your own electricity while use that electricity to heat. One of the things you have to worry about is they all drip water in some way. So you're going to tend to want one that has a condensate pump in it. There are some where there's just a tank that collects the water. Like air conditioners always produce, excess water. And if it's just in a tank, then you might have to be emptying it several times a day, and that can be kind of annoying. So if you get one that sits outside the window, then it can just drip down a hose or something, or has a pump that you can pump to a drain or something. So it would take some research if you're interested in doing this. Like I say, to make sure you get one that is, high efficiency. And it made me think of all of the heaters and coolers that you see in hotel rooms. I don't know if this is everywhere, but certainly around here, hotel rooms will often have an air conditioning unit in the wall, the outside wall of the hotel room, that also does heating. And I'm assuming that these over the years have always been just backup electric resistive heat when they produce heat. The air conditioner would be like a normal air conditioner. But yeah, I was thinking about that on my last trip through Minnesota, because we were in a couple of hotel rooms that had those type of heating units. Yeah. And I always thought, man, this must be really inefficient. Like there must be a really large power bill in these hotel rooms that have these resistive heaters that are integrated with the air conditioners. It's probably fine in the summer when the air conditioning is probably somewhat efficient. But yeah, it always seemed like a crazy inefficient way to heat hotel rooms. So I imagine this is a way forward for hotel rooms to switch these out with a heat pump version.
I wonder those units, if they're not heat pumps, because come to think of it, they plug into a normal outlet, and a normal outlet push out a lot of heat and air. I wonder if they're not heat pumps. I'm going to listen to one carefully next time I'm in a hotel to see if I can hear the compressor running. But that's interesting. And that, these hotels are always saying they're green and they're environmentally certified and all that. Well, is that one of the things they're doing, or is that one of the things they should be doing? Yeah.
And yeah, of course, like being able to plug into a regular household outlet is one of the advantages of these micro heat pumps.
It's interesting, you feel kind of helpless when you live in an apartment and you want to do something, because you don't own the building. This would be a method, even if you did this and you still relied a little bit on, say, baseboard heat or whatever they were pumping through. Maybe it's a boiler downstairs with your pipes.
You could reduce your use of fossil fuels at the very least.
And speaking of interesting stories, why the slowest EV chargers may be the fastest way to get people into EVs. This was published in Grist on January 30th. Apartments, they say, need EV charging. Supporters of trickle slow level 1 chargers. That's the chargers that, you in North America, you would just plug it into your 110 volt normal outlet.
You get maybe 1,000, 1,500 watts out of that.
Yeah, 1,500 would be the max, but on a regular basis, it would be, I think, 1,200, because it has to be like 80% of the max loads or something like that. And I just wanted to say that my Leaf, since we have 2 EVs now, is charging just on level 1, and it's going well. I'm surprised how well it's going. Now, I don't have a heater in the car, which used a lot of heat. And that was the main benefit of having a level 2, because you can heat off the grid.
Yeah.
So that's not an issue. But it is charging. I mean, it's a small mileage car, and I don't use it as my around town car. So it does charge up fairly quickly. And I often charge it during the day so I can make use of my solar, because it's only pulling in 1,000 watts or so. And I know that my panels might be pulling out 1,500 or 2,000 watts in the wintertime, and it's all going to my car.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the heater's broken on your Leaf, but that helps in some way, because it
But I was thinking, though, if I was in a situation and it did work, and remember, it's cost more than the car to fix, unfortunately. It has to be shipped away. If it did work, I think I would charge to 100% every day and have it finish charging at 100%, an hour before my departure time. And then I would have the heater come on, and it would use 1,000 watts from the grid. And on a really cold day, it would also, take part of that 1,000 watts and heat the battery, say 400 watts on the extreme minus 30s cold, perhaps. And then a little bit would go to charging, or, not the heating of the car, which is, thousands of watts, 6,000 or 7,000. So what it would do is it would deplete the battery in that situation, and it would go down to 80% or something, or maybe 90%, depending on how cold it was and how long it was warming up. It would still work for me. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
that might be a method.
And just to recap, so level 1 charging for an electric car is just a normal, in North America, 110 outlet. You'll get 1,000, maybe 1,500 watts. Level 2 is a 220 volt or 240 volt, and you can get, 7 kilowatts, maybe 10 kilowatts. And then level 3 is the fast charging that you'll find at, superchargers or, those type of outlets.
So in my car, because the Nissan Leaf is old, is from 2013, very early electric car, it only has a 3.3 kilowatt charger in it. I think you could get a 6 that was optional.
Yeah.
My Bolt, which is new, it has up to 11, which is nice. But, most panels at homes won't have enough juice for that.
Yeah, you've got to be wired to be able to do that, yeah.
And the charger, the EV supply charging equipment that is external, it was 7.5 kilowatts. So it's really good. I mean, it's better than 3.3. There's the odd situation where that's better. If you have a big battery that wants to charge up for a road trip the next day, you want to get it in there as fast as possible. But the 3.3 was fine for most situations and preheating the car.
Yeah, short trips around town is what you do in that Leaf, so...
Anyway, the theory here is that level 1 chargers, if you advocated for those in apartment buildings and condos, because they would require an expensive electrical upgrade to give everybody a level 2 240 volt charger. If you think of a building with 100 people in it or something, that's a massive amount of electricity that would have to go into that building. So that would be very expensive to do that. But a level 1, well, they're already there. And in Canada, depending on how heated your garage is, you might have a level 1 block heater cord for heating the oil in your car.
Yeah.
There's quite frequently those are around. So yeah, level 2 in North America, like you said, goes up to technically, I think, about 19 or 20 kilowatts, which is ridiculous. You'd have to be rich and have a Porsche that took that much, which I think they do. The required improvements and charging hardware were so costly that they'd only be able to install a couple of chargers, requiring tenants to share those chargers. And since the powerful level 2 would only fill a EV in a few hours, the residents would have to move their cars. You can imagine what this would be like, having to get up and move your car. That would be a pain in the butt. But the level 1 chargers, which... level 1 is not just a normal electrical outlet. It has to be dedicated to just that. It can't do anything else. Because if you turn on a hairdryer on the same circuit, it's going to blow the circuit. It's going to blow the breaker. So it has to be dedicated for that, and has to be, good quality and up to, I think you can actually go, it's 15 amps, but you can go to 20 amps on those outlets. So maybe that's even a possibility. So this is a community-led electricity provider called Peninsula Clean Energy, or PCE, in California. It's aimed at getting apartment building owners to adopt a commonly dismissed method of EV fueling, level 1. Now, done with a trusty wall outlet. This is in Belmont, California, by the way. One apartment owner in this program discovered they could install level 30 level 1 smart outlets, one for every parking stall without major electrical work. So that was a revelation to them. So they picked up nearly the entire bill, the electrical company, to do this. And why wouldn't you? You know, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, if you've got an apartment building, it might already have basically room in the electrical panel to put this stuff in.
And from my own experience, you know, not everybody lives where we live. Most people don't live where it gets down to minus 30, so it's not even an issue. And it's, you know, outside of that, it's probably pretty easy to do level 1 if you don't have a long commute. And a lot of people who buy EVs these days who aren't early adopters, they're actually buying it because they do have long commutes, you know, 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers a day. But, you know, this has to be also a thing for workplaces, right? You know, we need to get these into workplaces, not just level 2s, but some level 1, you know, which here, it's the right thing to do is to turn the block heater charging ports or the block heater outlets that we have in parking lots at workplaces here. They cycle on and off depending on the temperature. I guess if it's really cold, they stay on. But even that cycling on and off means that those chargers, the car won't work it because it's something in the electronics, some sort of signal in electronics they don't like. It's not a clean signal because they're smart plugs. So you need a special outlet for that that's on all the time. And, you know, we got to start doing that. We got to start putting that into building codes and just local bylaws to make that happen, because that will encourage EV adoption. If you can't charge at home at all, if you can charge at work and maybe the grocery store at a higher speed, that's pretty, you know, it's pretty good a way to get it done, especially if the workplace pays for it, which they often do.
Walmart had a big announcement this week that Walmart is refurbishing a bunch of their stores, and they're going to include some fast charging with that. So that should be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, story here from Bloomberg. There's a startup in Singapore that is going to strip old airplanes, basically take out the aluminum and make battery cases out of the aluminum. So this is a Singaporean startup, and they're called Nandina REM, and they're working on a strategy. So apparently there's all kinds of basically, you know, ditched airplanes that are sitting out there. And the number of retired airplanes is expected to triple over the next decade to more than 20,000. So there's already thousands of airplanes sitting out in fields and deserts and places not being used.
There's one near where you were. There's one near Palm Springs. I thought it was a fascinating place to drive by. You don't see that around here.
Yeah.
This is not something you see every day. Is
an airplane graveyard?
Yeah, for giant airliners that once were gloriously flying in the air.
Yeah, so it says currently there's about 8,000 retired aircraft around the world, and this number is expected to rise, you know, maybe 10, maybe 20,000 over the next several years. And, you know, they're made with things like really high-grade aluminum, and that's the perfect thing to make battery casings out of for EVs. So it takes about 30 days, I guess, to completely dismantle an airplane. And there's other components like plastics that they can reuse as well. Those can be used for, you know, car bumpers or things like this. You know, if this comes to full fruition, and they're basically starting a pilot project where they're going to do, a handful of them this year and maybe a couple hundred next year. Yeah, it's the figure here, just looking for it. It's something like, it could eventually support something like 50 million battery cases per year if this can get fully ramped up and all of this aluminum reused from all of these old airplanes.
I think the 30-day part is the barrier, because that's why they're sitting there. I mean, why else would they be sitting there other than you're waiting for a part to be used? Because some planes are, 30 years old and still in the air. But
yeah. No, I saw a documentary once about shipbreaking where they take apart old freighter ships.
Yeah.
It's
fascinating stuff.
Dangerous work. They basically take blowtorches and then, these massive iron panels from the ships fall down and, difficult, dangerous work. Hopefully this is not quite as difficult, but, massive potential. And the EU is going to be introducing regulations about, say, like the amount of recycled materials in cars. A lot of jurisdictions are starting to think about these kinds of things. And so this would also help manufacturers meet those kind of goals. Like in the EU, a certain amount of recycled parts are going to be required by law. And this is a way to do that.
It's time for the lightning round.
The Lightning Round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
According to the website GM Authority, the Chevy Equinox EV is shipping to dealers in the United States. Still no Canadian pricing was announced, and not sure when you'll be able to buy one. The dealers are starting to let people know they're coming. Let's hope it gets better than the Blazer, which they had to do a stop sell order on, and the Silverado EV, same thing. They've been having problems and made me lose a lot of confidence in their true efforts to electrify, Brian.
Well, it's a difficult problem, so let's give them some leeway and hope that they can sort out those issues soon.
Aiming to build a supply chain for solid-state batteries by 2030, Beijing in January set up a consortium called the China All-Solid-State Battery Collaborative Innovation Platform. 2 cups of coffee, I could say that. If it wasn't for the second cup, I wouldn't have got through that. It brings together government, academia, industry, including EV battery rivals CATL and BYD, to plan out a supply chain and to develop solid-state batteries. Why? Because China is worried that if someone else does it, they won't have their world-leading position on EV batteries, and that's very important to them. So hopefully that actually contributes something. A Waymo robotaxi hit a cyclist in San Francisco. Waymo has been very good about not having accidents. The cyclist was injured, but he's okay, or he or she, they are okay. Okay, they are okay. They got up and walked away and did not refuse any hospital treatment. I'm sure Waymo will send them a shiny new bike, I hope. The taxi braked hard, and the cyclist received minor injuries, and they were sort of hidden behind a truck that was turning. I didn't see the video. I don't know the exact situation. It's hard to judge it, but
but this is one of the issues with self-driving systems is how do you account for, a pedestrian or a cyclist that's hidden behind a truck? It can be difficult to see those. This is what happened. France has paused
EV subsidies, their program for 2024, citing an unexpected influx of applicants. That's from Electric. Can you believe that?
Yes,
unexpected. I expected it. Well, it's time for a CES Fast Fact. Crypto mining uses more electricity in the United States than the entire state of Utah.
What?
It's 2% of the grid.
What?
Yeah, crypto
That's
mining.
Crazy.
9 U.S. states, California, Colorado, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Rhode Island have jointly committed to get heat pumps up to a 90% market share of new heating and AC sales by 2040. They've all joined together to do that. Elon Musk has tweeted, farming has no material effect on climate change, and a quarter of the world's greenhouse gas emissions are due to food production. The majority of those are from farming. That is a fact. California's grid reached 117.8% of renewables. How? Well, it exported its extra, renewable generation. This was a few days ago. Winds, water, and solar and Saturday at 12:40 p.m. smashed the previous record. Wind was 11.7%, hydro 4.2%, small hydro 1.5%, geothermal 5%, which is actually pretty impressive, and solar was 95% plus.
Yeah, now as we know, there's been droughts in California, so some of their hydroelectric dams have been low on water, but there was massive rain and flooding really in California, which was not great, but hopefully at least filled up some of those hydro dams.
And there's lots of geothermal around where you were, around the Salton Sea there.
Yeah.
By Palm Springs. And there's several companies that are combining their operations with the geothermal to take the brine and turn it into lithium. And that lithium could power all the lithium needs of the entire United States just from that one area, they say. It remains to be seen if that's going to pan out. But yeah, and it's economical, relatively speaking, because you're combining it with something that's already going on. Shell Hydrogen will permanently close all 7 of its California pumping stations immediately and no longer operate light-duty hydrogen stations in the United States. Hydrogen refueling station numbers are dwindling in the United States. They're on the decline. Asthma emergency admissions plunged as lockdown air improved, an Oxford study has found. This is the first study to tally asthma exacerbations with air pollution during the pandemic, and it finds numbers admitted to hospital fell 41% during the lockdown. And that is a direct correlation that air pollution, NDP, are you listening? Air pollution from fossil fuels contributes to hospitalizations of asthma patients and sometimes deaths. That story was in The Guardian, Brian.
And we had cleaner air during the pandemic because everyone stayed home and stopped driving, and we got some cleaner air.
And we were podcasting. Remember when they could see the Himalayas for the first time? It was amazing, different things that happened during the pandemic. CS fast fact, it takes the average U.S. worker about 24 seconds of labor to pay for enough electricity to run the average U.S. household for 1 hour. So 24 seconds pays for an hour of electricity in the United States. If we take the average hourly earnings of non-farm payroll employees in the United States of $34 per hour, the average employee in the U.S. can pay for 1 day of use in 6 minutes and 9 seconds of working. To pay for all your energy needs. An average U.S. non-farmer worker earns enough in 30 seconds of labor to buy enough electricity to ride at least 100 miles on an e-bike. 30 seconds of work, 100 miles of transportation. Brian, not too shabby when you break out the e-bikes. 85% of utility-scale wind and solar capacity was added at a cheaper cost than fossil fuel alternatives in 2022. And we always hear that in many parts of the world, renewables are cheaper than fossil fuels. Well, here we have it. Last year, or 2 years ago, it was 85%. And I imagine when we get the 2023 numbers, it's going to be improved and so on and so forth. A 25-story massive timber rental housing tower has been approved by Vancouver City Council. So a wooden, that's taller than any building in our city. It's about 5 stories.
Timber skyscrapers are becoming a thing.
And finally this week from The Guardian, even though EVs weigh an average of 20% more than combustion vehicles, the brakes in the battery and hybrid vehicles worked less than their petrol and diesel equivalents in the study. This study on brake pollution was reduced by 88% in EVs. In the international driving test, and in the London driving test, it was reduced by 68%. And this was a story about auto obesity, the increasingly larger vehicles.
When you use your brakes in a car, it creates particulate pollution.
And that's asbestos, and it's not healthy. And before we go, congratulations to everyone's favorite U.S. climate scientist, Michael Mann. Michael, if you're listening to the show, why? You should go back to your science, but I'm going to congratulate you anyway.
This is not the Hollywood movie director?
No, not the Hollywood movie director. This is the climate scientist who is best known. Is often on TV advocating for the climate and cutting down disinformation. Yeah, he was libeled and defamed, and he's going to get $1 million based on a case that he brought 12 years ago against 2 conservative writers, one of which, by the way, is Canadian. The writers compared Mann's work to that of a convicted child molester and criticized his work as being false. As I say, 12 years it took, but he persisted, and he says, I hope this verdict sends a message that falsely attacking climate scientists is not protected speech. So congratulations to him, and hopefully that moves the needle on disinformation.
Fantastic, and congratulations to Michael Mann. Okay, that is it for our show this week. You can contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and around social media, you can find us as Clean Energy Pod.
And that includes Blue Sky, where we're now on Blue Sky. Now that they've opened the gates to everyone else, it's actually not bad. I've tested it out. It feels and looks like Twitter, but people say everyone's nicer. We'll see how that works out.
See how long that lasts.
Yeah. Also see our TikTok channel and our YouTube channels for special features, commentaries, and highlight videos from the show. And have a look at the Clean Energy Store for merch that's in your show notes. And if you're new to the show, always remember to subscribe on your favorite podcast app to get new episodes delivered every week. Rate and review us on that app. We like to have good reviews. It helps the show. And we'll see you next week when we turn over a digit to 200.
Yes, we'll see you next week for number 200.